And good afternoon, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. I am your host, Tony Defeo, as always, and thank you for joining me on this fine and lovely Saturday fall afternoon. Is that the proper grammar? It doesn't matter. Before I get started, I'd just like to encourage you, as always, to subscribe to the Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel, where we bring you podcasts each and every day. There's this show, there's Steelers Preview, there's Know Your Enemy, the Scobro Show, and it's the Live Mic, Let's Ride. Well, actually, the Live Mic, and I always get that wrong every week. The Live Mic and Let's Ride are audio only. And you can find those podcasts and all of our podcasts on any audio platform where you choose to listen to those podcasts. So also, I'd like you to welcome you to check out our Behind the Steel Curtain website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. It's the one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs, as we like to say. So please check that out. And as always, I want to talk about a few different topics in today's show, starting with Pittsburgh's 38-29 victory over the Eagles last Sunday at Heinz Field. And of course, welcome to everybody in the live chat. There's my man T-Money, Terry, my good friend Terry. He's a longtime Pittsburgh sports fan. He loves the Panthers, loves the Steelers, loves the Pirates. He's a Penguins fan. He loves them all. He's an usher. I think he's an usher at PNC Park. At least not this year, but he likes to do those kind of things whenever we don't have a pandemic going on. So he's a great fan. So welcome to Terry. There's Jared Devil, Ryan O'Toole, my main man Ryan. So thank you all for joining me. And I have a new setup. I have new headphones and a new microphone. So if you're having trouble hearing me, let me know in the live chat. Welcome to Steelers Pittsburgh and everybody else in the live chat. So I want to touch on last Sunday's victory over the Eagles. It was in many ways the most exciting win the Steelers have had so far this year. Obviously, the big story from that game was Chase Claypool, the rookie receiver who caught 3 touchdown passes and ran in another one, becoming the first rookie in team history to score 4 touchdowns in a game. Obviously, and that's why, to me, that's why sports are the greatest reality TV show, because you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, when you sat down that day, who would have thought that you would be seeing history in the form of Chase Claypool in his extraordinary game? All in all, he had 7 catches for 110 yards, and of course the 3 touchdowns and the 1 rushing touchdown. So it was a great game overall for him. It was the best game of his career. Of course, he turned out to be the focal point of the passing game. Probably thanks in large part to Deontay Johnson going out early with a back injury, and the fact that they were focusing on the likes of Juju and the tight ends, Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald. And I'll touch more on that later, but it was a great game by Claypool, and it was another exciting win for the Steelers. And you know, it didn't come without its scary moments. It's tense moments. Pittsburgh got out to a 31-14 lead early in the second quarter, and it looked like they were going to be riding on easy street. But then, of course, the Eagles scored 15 unanswered points to get right back in the game. I think the key moment in that game, honestly, it came right at the end, and it wasn't Chase Claypool's touchdown that put the icing on the cake. The 4th touchdown late in the game when Claypool and Ben teamed up, there was that great mismatch with the Eagles linebacker, which may never happen again in Chase Claypool's career. Again, I'll touch more on that later, but it wasn't that part. It was what came before that. After Eric Ebron fumbled, I think he fumbled with about 6 minutes left in the game, somewhere in there, and it was around midfield, and the Steelers defense hadn't really shown the ability to stop the Eagles offense really in the second half up to that point. They had a pick early in the third quarter, and that was pretty much it for stopping the offense in the second half. So it really felt like Steelers were up 31-29 at that point. It really felt like the Eagles were gonna take the lead either with a field goal or a touchdown. I was actually anticipating that they would score a touchdown, because that's how poorly the defense had played in the second half up to that point. But to their credit, they stopped them there. They I think the key play on that drive, it was a 3rd and 5 around the 40, the Steelers 40-yard line, or the 39, something like that. And Joe Hayden, who had been victimized a bit leading up to that point, he had a couple of questionable pass interference penalties during the game, but he made a great play, a perfect play on 3rd and 5 to force the 57-yard field goal that the Eagles kicker missed. And of course, then the Steelers went down and put the game away with the Claypool touchdown, this 4th of the game. So I think that was the key moment, is holding them there. It showed a lot of character by the defense, and that's what you need in today's NFL. You need a defense isn't going to shut a team down for 4 quarters. It's just not possible anymore. In most cases, it might happen occasionally, but in most cases, it's about situational defense, and it's about being opportunistic, and it's about rising to the occasion when you have to. The days of being able to hold a team to 10, 12 points every week, those are in the past, and certainly in 2020. And that's the I think that was the most important part of that game, and I think I was really impressed with the offense, because I think they rushed for 138 yards. Ben threw for 230, something like that. And of course, he had the 3 touchdowns. So I think it was an overall balanced attack. And to me, when I say balanced, I don't mean where you have to, as I said before, you have to rush 20 times and throw 20 times and you have 200 yards passing and 200 yards rushing. I think it's just a matter of being effective in both phases, and I think they were last week. So it was a great offensive performance. It's pretty much what you've seen all year from the offense, the ability to move the ball and score points, and they were 3 for 3 inside the red zone, which is always important, because getting from 20 to 20 has never been much of a problem for the Steelers in the modern era. It's what they do once they get inside the 20, once they get inside the red zone. And of course, they couldn't have been more efficient in that category on against the Eagles. So here's a comment. Here's a comment from Greg Wakefield. That's a new name. Welcome, Greg. Here I go again with the I'm always a step behind with the highlighting the comments. Here we go. Best overall team I've seen in many years, but man, did they like to cut it close. Well, yeah, that's I've talked about that before. You never really have an easy moment with these Steelers teams, but I think that's more reflective of the NFL as a whole. I mean, I think somebody said some one of the talking heads said something recently, which I agree with. It's almost like the NFL is set up to where, if you're a 10-win team, it's kind of pulling you down to those 8 wins. And if you're a 6-win team, the NFL is designed to try to elevate you up to 8 wins. It's like the league's designed for almost for everybody to go 8-8. That's kind of where it's at. And like Sam White once said, you can when you watch tape of all 32 teams before the start of the year, any year, you could pretty much pick out the 3 or 4 teams that are going to win 12 or 13 games, and the 3 or 4 teams that are going to lose 12 or 13 games. And the rest of the teams, the other 24 to 25, 24 teams, they're literally a few plays away over the course of the whole year from finishing anywhere between 6-10 and 10-6. And I think with the Steelers over the last few years, you've certainly seen that. I mean, a couple plays go here and there or the other way for them in the positive direction in both 2018 and 2019. And they were probably a playoff team. So, and in 2016 and 2017, or even 2015, a couple of plays go in a negative direction, they probably don't make the playoffs. So I think that's just reflective of the NFL as a whole. But you are right, Greg. It's never an easy time when watching the Steelers, at least not most of the time. They have the occasional blowout, but certainly not this year yet. Fingers crossed for Sunday. Maybe that'll happen. I doubt it, but you never know. So where was I? Anyway, as far as to finish up my thoughts on the Steelers and Eagles from last week, I think it was a lot more of what you've come to expect from them so far this year. It was a really productive offense, and the defense made plays when it had to, and that brings up my next point, and that is once again talking about the Steelers defense and what is wrong with the Steelers defense. That's been on everybody's mind for the first 4 weeks, because they've only held one team to under 20 points so far, right? I think they've only held one team to less than 3 touchdowns in a game. So, there's concern there. And last week you saw third down conversions. They were 10 of 14 for the game. At one point, the Eagles, I think they converted on 10 of their first 12, and then Pittsburgh kind of tightened things up at the end and finished strong. But yeah, it seemed like the Eagles just could do no wrong on third down. There was a couple plays. There was one in particular, 3rd and 17 near the end of the first half, where they converted, and the Eagles almost, if it wasn't for some maybe unnecessary timeouts earlier in the half, and maybe some poor clock management, they might have been able to sneak out of the first half with an extra 3 points, and that might have made a difference at the end of the game. But yeah, it was concerning. But what I didn't know until Sunday was that no Steeler offensive lineman had been called for holding this year. I mentioned after the first week the low amount of penalties that were called in the first week, and that's continued over the course of the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, particularly offensive holding calls. And what I also didn't know until I read Shannon White's article — he's one of our great writers on Behind the Steel Curtain, one of our great contributors — is that through 4 weeks, no Steelers opponent has been called for offensive holding, meaning no offensive lineman has been called for holding against the Steelers. And when you have a team that makes its hay, a defense that makes its hay primarily with getting after the passer, with a relentless pass rush, and the Steelers have done a great job. Obviously, through all that adversity, they have 20 sacks, which obviously is on pace for 80, and 50 quarterback hits, which is on pace for 200. So obviously they're still doing a good job of getting after the passer. But you see TJ Watt getting held. You see him getting the James Harrison treatment. The getting grabbed around the neck and sort of driven to the ground. And obviously you see the same thing with Bud Dupree. And I'm sure the linemen, who you don't really get to focus on as much, they're having that same treatment. And that has to be frustrating to know you're beating your opponent continuously, and yet they're allowed to kind of cheat, because the NFL just has made it an emphasis to reduce holding calls on offensive holding calls, I guess, to increase scoring. I don't know. And in conjunction with that, the pass interference calls, defensive pass interference calls are increasing. I mean, we saw that on both sides last week. Joe Hayden was called for a couple, and I think the Steelers benefited from a couple of questionable defensive pass interference calls against Philadelphia. So, when you have that combination of you're de-emphasizing holding calls and you're re-emphasizing defensive pass interference, although I don't think the NFL has ever not emphasized defensive pass interference. I think they, what are you going to do, right? So if you look at the Steelers defense in a vacuum, then you say, oh man, this defense is awful. And it's nothing compared to what it was in 2019. And it's a fraud. And it's not what they're not getting the job done. But when you look at them relative to the other 31 defenses, they stack up really well. I think they're third now in overall defense. As far as points per game, it's a shade under 22, which seems like a lot, but it's still, I think they're sixth now or seventh. Last time I checked, with all these makeup games, all these Tuesday games, it's hard to keep track of the stats day by day, but I think they're sixth now, and they're third or fourth against the run, and they're in the middle of the pack with against the pass in passing yards, which, if the NFL, as I've talked about before, when you take one thing away, you're probably gonna be a bit deficient in another area. So I'm not really that worried about that. Because like I've said before, they're still getting after the quarterback. They lead the league in sacks with 20, and I mentioned the pressures, the hits. And they're still on pace for close to 30 takeaways. It's not 38 like it was last year, at least they're not on that pace yet. But they're still averaging nearly 2 takeaways a game. And we saw how vital they were last week. That Steven Nelson pick in the beginning of the first half. That the Steelers took the ball. They were up 24-14, or I'm sorry, they were up 17-14 at the start of the second half. Took the second half kickoff, scored a touchdown. Steven Nelson has a pick, his first pick of the game, and they convert that into another touchdown. So, it's just a matter of being opportunistic and getting after the quarterback. And as long as the Steelers continue to do both of those things, then I think they'll be okay as far as defense, because you're not going to shut down, as I said, to repeat myself for like the 7th time, you're not going to shut down offenses week in and week out anymore. It's just not possible, And if you want to compare the Steelers defense to the Browns, Sunday's opponent, the Browns were giving up nearly 30 points a game. So they're giving up nearly a touchdown, or they are over a touchdown more a game than Pittsburgh's defense is through their first 5 games. And as far as they're pretty good against the run, I think I want to say 4th, but they're 30th against the pass. So but their key is, like the Steelers, they get after the passer, not quite the same rate as Pittsburgh does. They have 12 sacks, half of them by Myles Garrett, and just 21 quarterback hits, which obviously pales in comparison to what Pittsburgh's been doing. So, but they're opportunistic. They have 12 takeaways through 5 weeks, whereas Pittsburgh has 7. So, they're not quite as relentless with getting after the passer. They're really a one-man show when it comes to that, and that's Garrett. But they take the football away, and that's part of the reason why that they've been successful on through 5 weeks. So to wrap that topic up, I really wouldn't worry about Pittsburgh's defense. I think if somebody gets hurt, a major name gets hurt, knock on wood, then maybe it's time to worry. But here's I'm going to try to get this right. I'm going to try to be on point with this, with my comment finger. Here's one from Aziac Noble. Thank you for the comment. Baltimore passing offense is like 27th in the league. Well, there you go. So, and that kind of something I'll touch on later with the Browns and how the Steelers can sort of diffuse their pretty potent offense. So that's the second topic I wanted to touch on. And of course, the third topic is Chase Claypool and what a glorious draft pick he's been so far, right? I mean, there were questions when the Steelers picked him in the second round out of Notre Dame, and that was understandable. I mean, I knew that was going to happen because there were so many names that were going to be available when the Steelers picked the 27th in the second round, because that was their first pick. And we talked about so many, leading up to the draft, the 4 or 5 months that lead into the draft, there's just so much coverage about that event, and so many prospects get profiled and talked about, and there's so many fans have preferences and draft crushes. So I knew it wasn't going to be a universally loved pick. I mean, TJ Watt wasn't a universally beloved draft pick, and look at him. So, but I mean, he's been more than advertised through his first 4 games. And, we saw what he did last week, and it's just been, it's a small sample size. I'm not, I'm going to sort of reel it back in my next topic. Well, sort of I'll pump the brakes a bit on Chase Claypool, but it's been such a pleasurable experience watching him so far, because he's fast. He's physical, and he loves to play football. You can see it. I mean, he loves to block, and that's what he was known for in college. He's often the first one down on kick coverage, so he's a football player, right? In the mold of a Hines Ward, but just a much better physical specimen than a Hines Ward, and even a Juju Smith-Schuster, who's a great football player in his own right. So it's just been a great experience watching him so far, and I think there's a lot of great things in store for him moving forward. And a funny little story about Claypool, a personal story, is I pretty much suck at fantasy football. I just don't pay as much attention as I should. There are people that just do nothing but pay attention to fantasy football, and I don't pay nearly as much attention as they do. And with all the postponements through COVID and so many players getting hurt and Michael Thomas punching somebody and him being deactivated for last week's game. He punched one of his teammates in practice, I guess, last week. So he was deactivated. Julio Jones, who's another one of my receivers, he's hurt. So like 10 o'clock last week, I noticed all this, like all these O's, meaning out for the game on my roster. So I said, what am I going to do? So I just, on a hunch, I picked up Chase Claypool and started him. And I thought, all right, he might do okay for me. And boy, did he ever. I mean, he was, I think I got like 40 points from him. But with my luck, it wasn't good enough because I didn't catch I think it was Michael Thomas was on the same team. I have two different teams. Anyway, I didn't catch the Michael Thomas deactivation in time. It was Julio Jones. That's right. Julio Jones was the one I didn't catch in time. So he was in my starting lineup. So because of that, I lost by 2 points. But still, it was a pretty cool story. I would have lost by, I guess, 42 points if it wasn't for that. So Chase Claypool, just been a marvelous first month for him, and I'm sure he's on top of the world right now. So that's that topic. And that brings me to my next topic, and that's the rush to make Chase Claypool the number one receiver. We like all day on Monday and Tuesday, listening to talk radio. That's all I do when I drive all day long. So I listen to talk radio, and it's like people were just rushing to make that declaration. Is Chase Claypool the number one receiver? And a lot of people think he is now. A lot of people think he is the number one guy on the roster. And I don't disagree with the potential. I mean, I just explained him talking about my previously talking about Chase Claypool. I explained why he has that skill set. He's fast, he's big, he's strong, he's physical. So the potential is there. But is it enough of a sample size, 4 games, to declare him the number one receiver? I know a lot of people on Behind the Steel Curtain already think he's their best receiver. And again, he very well might be, but I think we have to acknowledge that he's benefiting from being a mismatch right now, because for one thing, these coaches through 4 weeks, they knew nothing about him, just what he did in college. They knew nothing about him at the pro level. Right. And if you look at recent history with guys like Martavis Bryant, Juju Smith-Schuster, even Sammy Coates, I mean, they benefited early in their careers from being like the third option or not really the third option, but like just being a total unknown for opposing teams, opposing defensive coordinators. So they kind of just burst onto the scene. I mean, you saw what Bryant did. He was activated midway through his rookie year, and it was like, wow, where's this guy been our whole lives, right? I mean, he was just an extraordinary player. I was in Cincinnati when he caught that 95-yard touchdown game. Touchdown pass. I was in that end zone. If you ever look at that play and see him running into the end zone, I was there, jumping up and down with my buddies and my uncle watching that game. So that was a great debut to his career. And in 2016, Sammy Coates, it was his second year. He didn't really do anything his rookie year. I think he played a bunch in the playoffs because of injuries to AB and some other people. But it was really 2016 where he burst onto the scene. And the first 4 or 5 games, he was a deep threat, and he looked like Mike Wallace. And then, of course, he got hurt, and that was pretty much it for him. He broke his fingers, and I think he had a hamstring problem too. And that was the end for him. And even Juju a few years ago, when he burst onto the scene, it was Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant as the 1 and 2 options for Ben. and Juju was the unknown rookie. I think Eli Rogers was more of he was a more of a target for Ben at that point than Juju was. But you saw how effective he was as like a slot receiver, as the third or fourth option. He got like how many red zone touchdowns did he have over the first 5 or 6 weeks? I think he set a team record for rookies. So I think that's part of what's going on here with Chase Claypool. Yes, he's a very talented guy. It might be, for all we know, might be the next Randy Moss. We don't know. But I think teams have to prepare for Juju Smith-Schuster. And you hear, you see that he's getting double teamed. At least he has been so far. And he was last year as the number one option, right? And they have to prepare for Deontay Johnson. He's expected to be a major star in the not so distant future. They have to prepare for Eric Ebron, Vance McDonald. So far, Chase Claypool hasn't been on anybody's radar. Well, I mean, that's all going to change, you would think, moving forward. And the difference between Juju and Martavis Bryant and Sammy Coates and those guys is only Juju was given the opportunity to transition from the unknown rookie to the second or third receiver to the number one guy. He's the only one who's been able to make that transition. And so far, it's been a mixed bag, but I think it's fair to acknowledge that his first try at the number one role last year, he had to do that without Ben Roethlisberger and with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph leading as his throwing him passes. And of course, this year he's gotten off to I wouldn't say a slow start, but he's just another one of Ben's targets. He hasn't been the main guy. I mean, he was the leading receiver heading into week 4 and the leader in yardage, but he wasn't really the standout number one guy. So I think the great thing, and I've talked about this before, the great thing about this offense is you can have a different star each and every week. Last week it was Chase Claypool. Tomorrow or Sunday against the Browns, it might be James Washington. Look what he did last year in that second game against Cleveland. That was the best game of his career. He made 3 fantastic catches in that game. So I think, for whatever reason, when it comes to receivers, Steeler fans seem to sour on them pretty quickly. And so far, Juju hasn't given anybody any reason to sour on him in terms of his personality. It's just that he hasn't been able to make that full transition from the unknown to the number 2 option to the number one guy. He hasn't been able to stand out like an Antonio Brown did, which, let's be real. As much as you hate the guy, Antonio Brown was the modern day Jerry Rice. So to compare anybody to him is probably a little bit unfair. So the jury's still out on whether or not Juju could be the number one guy, but I don't think the jury's out on whether or not other opposing defenses are focusing on him, because he has a much longer track record than does Chase Claypool. So I think it'll be interesting to see if once teams start focusing on Claypool, and they better, they can't leave him on linebackers anymore, or they should be fired on the spot. Any coordinator that although I shouldn't say that because it seems to happen with Keith Butler all the time. But after last week with that 4th touchdown where they had him, the Eagles had a linebacker lined up on Claypool. I don't think he's going to get that kind of treatment moving forward. He's going to be more of a focal point, and teams are going to start preparing for him. And I think that might open things up for, as I said, a James Washington or Eric Ebron. It might be his day, or Juju. Or Deontay Johnson. He's going to be out for Sunday's game, but so I think, again, to sum that up, I think Claypool has the tools to be the number one guy, but to make that declaration right away, I think it's a little bit too soon for that. So finally, I want to talk about the Steelers and the Browns. And before I get into that, of course, it's the first game between the two teams with Myles Garrett in the lineup since that incident last year with where he swung, he smacked Mason Rudolph in the head with his own helmet in that fracas at the end of the game. And it's one of the strangest topics I've ever seen, because when you look at that, everything that went down there, it's pretty obvious that who committed the egregious act, right? But with it being the modern era and social media being so prevalent and everybody having an opinion, we see what can happen when it's not about being who's right or who's wrong. It's about who's able to rally enough people on their side. And I think Myles Garrett was able to do that because he created doubt in people's minds as to why he hit Rudolph in the head. It wasn't just because he lost his cool on the football field and they were fighting. It was because either Rudolph kept instigating and because he started the fight, or if it's because he used a racial slur, and that created enough doubt in everybody's mind to now you have like half the football viewing population is on Garrett's side and the other half's on Rudolph's side. You would think that the vast majority of America would look at that and go, oh yeah, that was definitely Garrett's fault. He was in the wrongdoing there. And it didn't really matter what led up to that. He deserved to be suspended, but it's not like that anymore. But it's just I think it's kind of a microcosm of society in general now. It's not about just like facts. It's about what side are you on. And if you're on Team Garrett, then you're gonna believe him. If you're on Team Mason, then you're gonna believe him, and that's unfortunate. But that brings me to the broader point of Sunday's game. Is I think for whatever reason the Browns are using that as a rallying cry. You saw Kareem Hunt talking to the media the other day, saying that this game's for Myles Garrett and the city of Cleveland and blah, blah, blah. Right. They're using for whatever reason, the Steelers should be the ones that are motivated to win that game and to make things right for Mason Rudolph and for their organization. Because once again, they were dragged through the mud because of something another person did. In 2019 in the offseason, it was Antonio Brown who was acting like a jerk. And for some reason, the Steelers came out looking like the bad guys. And last year, Myles Garrett swung the helmet at Mason Rudolph and hit him in the head and could have killed him. But for some reason, the Steelers were the bad guys, right? So they should be the ones who are angry. But instead, it's the Browns who are like, oh, we're going to do this we're going to show everybody. Well, and that's where I think the Steelers could have an edge, because I don't think they're going to be quite as emotional going into Sunday's game as the Browns are. I think for the Steelers, it's a big game. They're 4-0, but I think they've been here before and they've done this before, right? They're used to being in big games. Big Ben's obviously seen everything there is to see on a football field. And you can say almost the same thing about guys like Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt, even Joe Hayden, David DeCastro, Big Al, Pouncey, obviously. These guys have been around the block, right? They've been in big games as recently as last year. So, they're not going to blink. Whereas I think the Browns are putting a lot of emphasis on this game. For them, it's a week 6 game. For the Steelers, it's the 5th game of the year. And I think they're putting a lot of emphasis on this game. And I think that could be a mistake, because I think the Steelers are going to be more businesslike than people realize. I think a lot of people think this is going to be a bloodbath, and Garrett's, it's going to be like a showdown between Garrett and Pouncey, or Garrett and whoever. And, but I don't see that, because one thing, I don't think Garrett, he came off as a huge jerk with the helmets, what he did with the helmet. I mean, that could have been catastrophic. And of course, the smearing Mason Rudolph's name afterwards and refusing to, even though there's no evidence whatsoever to support his claim that Rudolph said what he said, he still won't back down from that statement. So I think even though he's acting like a jerk, I think he's basically a good guy. He's not Vontaze perfect. So I don't see him, getting doing anything egregious on that football field tomorrow at Heinz Field. I don't see that. So I think the Steelers are going to remain businesslike, and I think the Browns are going to maybe they're not going to want revenge. I think they're just looking to make a name for themselves as far as putting themselves on the map as a winning football organization. And so I think they're going to be emotional in that way. So I think that's where the Steelers could take advantage. And if you're talking about strategy and what the Steelers could do to win this game, I just think it's just as simple as doing what they have done through the first month, and that's take the running game away. The Browns lead the NFL in rushing with 188 yards a game. So I think if they can shut that down, or maybe not shut it down, but make it less effective, like maybe hold Cleveland under 100 yards and put the game in Baker Mayfield's hands, then I think that'll be the difference in the game. Because I think, if you shut down the Steelers running game, that's not gonna kill the offense. Ben doesn't care about that. Most quarterbacks of his stature and his experience, they don't care about you shutting the running game down. They can still beat you, and he certainly has enough weapons to do that. So I think if they shut the Steelers running game down, I still think Pittsburgh can score. But if the Steelers shut the Browns running game down, then I think the Browns are going to have a hard time. And I think Baker Mayfield's going to make some pretty major mistakes, because they've only had 6 takeaways or turnovers through 5 games. But I think if that's because they've had the lead in a lot of their games, and I think if they can put the game on Mayfield's right arm, I think that's where the Steelers are going to come out ahead. So I'm looking for it to be a close game, but I'm looking for the Steelers to pull it out in the fourth quarter. I'm thinking that's how it's going to. I know I've talked about a blowout in my online predictions, but the more I think about this game, the more I think it's going to be a close game, and I think the Steelers are gonna prevail at the end. So that's all I had to. Those are all my topics for today, and once again, I will open it up to some questions. So let's see what we have from you guys. Here's one from Dave Shipley, a great comment. He makes a good point. We haven't had a first drive TD in 2 years. That's true, but last year that was more because of the quarterback play. I think this year it's still early to worry about that, and they're averaging close to 30 points a game, so I don't think that's a huge deal just yet. Here's one from Lumberzack, a question. Tony, do you think we're making any trades before the deadline? If so, who? I don't really see any trades that they could make. I mean, if they were to make a trade, I would say it'd be for maybe an offensive lineman, since they've had so many problems staying healthy in that regard. I don't know. I can't really think of any major area where they would need to make a trade. There were rumors that they were talking about trading Justin Lane to the the Washington football team for Dwayne Haskins. I mean, that wouldn't benefit them this year. That's just maybe another flyer on a possible heir apparent to Ben. But other than that, I really can't think of any trades that I would want to see them make, because I think they're a pretty well-rounded football team. Maybe the offensive line, just for depth. That's the only possible trade I could see them making at this point. And here's some, the Browns have had some injury problems and some illness problems, and Odell Beckham, he had to kind of go in temporary quarantine because he was ill but he tested negative for COVID-19. But he's expected to play. Jarvis Landry had some injury problems heading into the week, and in Baker Mayfield, I think he had a rib injury, and they were all listed as questionable. But I think they're all going to play. So I don't think that's. I think the Steelers are going to get all that the Browns have to offer, but I think they're going to prevail at the end. Let's see what else we have here. Any questions I may have missed? If I can scroll up a little bit. Let's see. Here's one from Ezra, my man Ezra. Who should back up Connor, McFarland or Snell? Well, I know who you think should back him up, and that's McFarland. But I don't think it really matters. I think the way they've been using both equally in terms of production, anyway, in terms of reps. So I think it's you can use either or at this point. I think Snell has more of a defined role than he did early on. I think he's more of the short yardage specialist, and I think McFarland's the change of pace guy. So I don't think when it comes to when you were doing sort of a running back by committee, and they're doing not quite a running back by committee, but more so than they have in the past. That I don't think it matters who the backup is. It's just a matter of which role each back has. And as you see now, Jalen Samuels is barely even in the mix. Here's a guy that I touted in the offseason, kind of defended, but he really hasn't been involved in the offense so far. So you can see where they're going with their running back. It's James Connors is getting the majority of the carries, and Snell and McFarland are splitting carries with Snell again being the short yardage guy, and McFarland sort of being the change of pace. So I don't think it really matters. Here's another one from Ezra. If you're Tomlin, do you pull a hardball and put Mason in for one play? I would. Not really. I wouldn't. I don't think Tomlin would do that. I maybe if the game's out of reach, I'd like to see, maybe in a good way out of reach, maybe Mason get in there and not just hand the ball off, but sort of maybe do some damage with his arm. But I thought that will happen too, or either. Here's one from Jerry Cherry Band. If you don't know Jerry Cherry Band, he's responsible for a lot of the audio music for Let's Ride and I don't know. I think there's a couple others. I think the Retro Show. He did. I think Michael Beck. I heard Jeff Hartman say that when I listened to one of his recent podcasts that Michael has a different set of music for his show. But yeah, Jerry Cherry Band. Check that out. They're really, really good stuff. Here's one from Rhino Tola. Comments. Hoping for 6 sacks, 3 from TJ. Well, TJ Watt has had a successful career against the Browns. I mean, he's made his half of his. I think he's gotten half of his sacks from the Browns alone. So I wouldn't be surprised. All right, let's see. Here's one from Getting Bent with Bo. I haven't seen you in a while. He's one of our regular viewers and listeners. We are getting that dub tomorrow for my birthday. Sunday's happy birthday, Bo. Today's my sister's birthday. So I hope you have a great birthday. I hope you're right. Being born in May, I never get to experience a Steelers game on my birthday, but fingers crossed this year with the pandemic. You never know the way things are going. We might have a week 39 the way things are going with all the postponements. So you never know. Here's another comment from Ezra. I'll take a few more before I sign off. This is a game where Bud eats all day because of the focus on TJ. Well, hey, I mean, Bud Dupree's had a pretty good year, but one thing he hasn't done yet is had a great statistical game. It's one word I can never say. Statistical. But anyway, so yeah, maybe Sunday's the game that Bud breaks out. So we'll see. It doesn't matter though. I think they're going to be, if they can shut the running game down, the Browns running game, and again, as I mentioned earlier, put the game in Baker Mayfield's hands, then I think they're going to have plenty of opportunities to get their quarterback sacks on Sunday. Here's one from Sixburg, and this, I will probably wrap things up with this. Well, once again, I was a little bit too slow, but here's Asiak Noble. Minka gets a pick 6. Well, there you go. That would be welcome because he really hasn't. He's been kind of invisible so far this year. Just one more I wanted to get to it because I really thought it was funny, and it's from not a normal viewer. Sixburg 6. TJ must have handles. He gets held every play. Well, that's the thing, and that's kind of brings it back home to what I mentioned earlier in the show with the defense. You know, when your main strength as a team and your best player, and you can make a lot of arguments that TJ Watt's the Steelers' best player now on offense or defense. When your number one strength is getting out after the quarterback, and the league isn't calling offensive holding, that can be pretty frustrating, and that could explain a lot of what's going on with the defense. And I kind of noticed TJ Watt. Maybe I was just imagining it because I was projecting, But it seemed like he was kind of frustrated at the end of that game. I know he left the game briefly with a wrist injury, and that might have been why he looked frustrated. But he definitely, I can see a player like that who knows he's getting home, or he has the ability to get home just on every pass he plays. I can see that a player like that getting quite angry. I mean, the stories are legendary about Mean Joe Green early in his career when he was basically unblockable, and what he would do to guys that held him. He would punch him in the gut, punch him in the groin, and obviously you can't really do that today without causing almost a national crisis. So, yeah. On that note, I want to thank you all. I think I went over a few minutes, but that's okay. I want to thank you all for a great show, and I kind of hammered home most of the points I wanted to, not quite as many in a way that I wanted to, but I think it was a fun show, and you guys rock, and I will talk to you next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and go Steelers.